I am Joshua Sterling, 25 years old, and 7 years ago my family threw me away like a bag of trash because I took up too much square footage. Before I tell you how I ended up standing on their front porch with a deed in one hand and an eviction notice in the other, tell me where you are listening from in the comments. I want to know who is riding shotgun with me on this journey. The engine of my Rolls-Royce Cullinan purred into silence. It's a specific kind of silence, heavy, expensive, and completely isolating from the outside world. Inside the cabin, it smelled of conditioned leather and success. Outside, through the tinted glass, I looked at the house. 1402 Oak Street. It looked smaller than I remembered. The white siding was graying, peeling away in long, sunburned strips like dead skin. The lawn, which my father used to make me mow twice a week with military precision, was now a jungle of crabgrass and dandelions. The gutters were hanging loose on the left side, choked with years of dead leaves. It smelled of neglect. It smelled of failure. My lawyer, Sarah, sat in the passenger seat. She adjusted her glasses, looking at the file in her lap. She didn't look at the house. To her, this was just another asset acquisition, another foreclosure process we had navigated. "Are you sure you want to do this yourself, Josh?" she asked, her voice professional but laced with a hint of concern. "I can have the sheriff serve the papers. You don't have to make contact. It's cleaner that way." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. The leather squeaked under my gloves. "No, Sarah. It has to be me. A sheriff is just the law. This is personal. I need to see their faces. I need to see if they remember." "Remember what?" "The space," I said, a bitter smile touching my lips. "I need to see if they enjoyed the space." I opened the door and stepped out. The humid air hit me, carrying the scent of impending rain and old memories. My Italian leather shoes crunched on the cracked concrete of the driveway, the same driveway where I had spent hours scrubbing oil stains because my brother, Ethan, couldn't be bothered to fix the leak in his junk car. As I walked toward the front door, the years folded back on themselves. The present faded and I was 18 again. It was my birthday, November 14th. Most kids get a party, maybe a car, or at least a cake. I got a suitcase. I sat at the dinner table, staring at a plate of dry meatloaf. My mother, Catherine, was nervously arranging her silverware, avoiding eye contact. My father, Robert, was chewing slowly, his eyes fixed on the television in the corner. And then there was Ethan. Ethan was 20 years old then, the golden child. He sat across from me, wearing headphones around his neck, tapping furiously on his phone. He didn't even look up to say happy birthday. "So," my father said, clearing his throat. The sound was like a gavel hitting a judge's bench. "Josh, you're 18 today. An adult." "Yes, sir," I said, trying to muster a smile. "I was thinking maybe I could pick up some extra shifts at the grocery store, start saving for community college." Ethan snorted. "Community college? Why bother? You're not the academic type, Josh. You're built for labor." "Ethan," Mom said softly, but she didn't scold him. She never scolded him. "Josh, listen. Your father and I have been talking. With Ethan's career taking off." "Career?" I asked. Ethan played video games. He sat in his room for 14 hours a day, screaming at a screen, convinced he was going to be the next big streamer. He hadn't made a dime in 2 years. "He needs a studio," Dad interrupted, his voice firm. "He needs a dedicated space for his equipment. The lighting, the green screen, the multiple monitors. His current room is too small. It's stifling his creativity." I looked around the table, confusion settling in my gut. "Okay, so he can move into the basement? Or the garage?" "The basement is damp," Ethan said, finally looking at me. His eyes were cold, entitled. "It ruins the acoustics, and the garage is too hot." "We need your room, Josh," Dad said. He didn't even blink. I dropped my fork, clattered loudly against the china. "My room? What do you mean?" "Ethan needs the master layout," Mom explained, her voice trembling slightly, trying to make it sound reasonable. Your room connects to the high-speed internet line better. It has the best natural light for his daytime streams. We're going to knock down the wall between your room and the guest closet to give him a full suite. Okay? I stammered, panic rising in my chest. But where do I sleep? The couch. Dad wiped his mouth with a napkin and set it down. You're 18, son. A man. It's time you found your own way. We can't support 2 grown men in this house, and Ethan... Well, Ethan has a delicate temperament. He needs our support right now. You're strong. You can handle the real world. You're kicking me out? My voice cracked. For a gaming room? It's a streaming studio, Ethan corrected, smirking. And don't be dramatic. It's about resource allocation. I have potential. You're just taking up space. Space, I whispered. We've packed your things, Mom said, gesturing to the hallway. 2 black garbage bags and my old high school gym bag sat by the door. We didn't want you to stress about packing. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. I looked at my mother. This was the woman who had nursed me through the flu, who had taught me to tie my shoes. Mom, you're agreeing to this? I have nowhere to go. I have $50 in my bank account. She looked at Dad, then at Ethan, and finally, briefly, at me. Her expression wasn't one of love. It was one of calculation. She chose the path of least resistance. She chose her favorite. It's for the best, Josh. You'll thank us later. It will make you tough. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled $50 bill. Here. This should cover a motel for a night or 2 until you find a job. A job? I have a job at the grocery store. It pays minimum wage. Then work harder, Dad snapped, standing up. The conversation was over. Get going. Ethan has equipment arriving tomorrow morning, and we need the room cleared. I walked to the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would break my ribs. I grabbed the garbage bags. They were light. Everything I owned in 18 years weighed almost nothing. I opened the door and looked back. Ethan was already back on his phone. Dad was watching TV. Mom was clearing the table, scrubbing away the evidence of my existence. I won't forget this, I said, my voice shaking. Close the door, Dad said without looking back. You're letting the air conditioning out. The door clicked shut. The sound was final. It was the sound of a life ending. I stood on the porch, the same porch I was standing on now 7 years later. Back then it was raining. I walked down the driveway, the garbage bags bumping against my legs. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a plan. I walked until my feet bled, the word space echoing in my mind like a curse. They valued a potential gaming room over their own son. They traded my future for Ethan's fantasy. I looked down at the eviction notice in my hand today. The paper was crisp, legal, and absolute. Ready? Sarah asked from the car. I took a deep breath, smoothing the lapel of my bespoke suit. More than ready, I murmured. I walked up the steps. The wood groaned under my weight, rotten and weak. I raised my hand and knocked. 3 hard, deliberate raps. Knock, knock, knock. It was time to see if Ethan had enjoyed his studio. The door didn't open immediately. I waited, listening to the muffled sounds of a television inside. It sounded like a game show, the wheel spinning, people cheering for money they hadn't earned. Fitting. While I waited, the memory of that first night 7 years ago clawed at my throat. When I walked away from the house that night, I thought I would find a cheap motel. But the $50 Mom gave me didn't go far. The cheapest dive in town wanted $60 plus a deposit. I walked to the grocery store where I worked, thinking I could sleep in the stockroom, but the night manager, a guy named Rick who always hated me, caught me trying to sneak in. Not a charity, Josh, he had sneered, taking my keys. If you're homeless, you're a liability. Don't come back. Fired and homeless in the span of 4 hours. Happy birthday to me. I ended up at the city park, curling up on a bench. But the police came by 2 a.m. They shined a flashlight in my face, told me to move along or get arrested for loitering. Where do I go? I had asked, shielding my eyes from the glare. Not here, the officer said. Try the underpass on 4th Street. That's where the rest of them are. The rest of them. I was one of them now. I walked to the 4th Street bridge. It was a massive concrete overpass where the interstate cut through the edge of town. Beneath it, the ground was a mixture of dirt, gravel, and trash. It smelled of urine, wet dog, and stale beer. Shadows moved in the darkness. I clutched my garbage bags tight, finding a spot near a concrete pillar that offered some shelter from the wind. I sat down, pulling my knees to my chest. I was wearing a thin hoodie and jeans. The cold from the concrete seeped straight into my bones. I didn't sleep that night. I listened to the cars thumping overhead, people going home, people going to work, people with lives. And I listened to the rats. They were bold, scurrying around the edges of the firelight from a barrel nearby. Their eyes reflected the orange glow, watching me, waiting for me to weaken. 2 days passed. The $50 went to cheap food and a blanket I bought from a thrift store. I was dirty. I was hungry. I was invisible. On the 3rd night it rained. A torrential downpour that turned the dirt under the bridge into mud. I was shivering so violently my teeth clattered like dice in a cup. You're gonna freeze to death, kid. I looked up. Standing over me was an old man. He looked like a heap of rags with a beard. His face was weathered like old leather, deep cracks running through skin that had seen too much sun and too much frost. He had one eye that was milky white and blind, but the other one was sharp, blue, and intelligent. I'm okay, I stammered, lying. You're turning blue, he grunted. He kicked a piece of cardboard toward me. Get off the dirt. Concrete sucks the heat out of you. Cardboard insulates. He sat down a few feet away, unwrapping a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Half a turkey sub. He split it in two and tossed a piece to me. Eat. Engine needs fuel. I devoured it. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. Thank you, I whispered. Name's Miller, he said. Used to be Chief, but now it's just Miller. I'm Josh. You run away, Josh? Kicked out, I said, the shame burning my face. My brother needed my room. Miller laughed. It was a dry, raspy sound, like sandpaper on wood. Space, huh? That's what it always comes down to. Square footage. I used to build spaces. Big ones. Skyscrapers, bridges. Like this one. He tapped the pillar behind him. You built this. I was the structural engineer, he said, taking a sip from a canteen. I designed the load-bearing distribution. See that arch? It handles the compression while the cables take the tension. It's all about balance. Life is the same. Too much tension, you snap. Too much compression, you crumble. What happened? I asked, looking at his rags. Life, he said simply. Divorce. Bottle. Lost the balance. But I never lost the knowledge. For the next 6 months, Miller became my father, my teacher, and my savior. We survived together under that bridge. He taught me how to find day labor jobs. He showed me where to get free showers at the truck stop. But more importantly, he taught me how to see the world. He would find discarded blueprints in the dumpsters behind construction firms and bring them back to the bridge. Under the flickering light of a street lamp, he taught me how to read them. Look here, Josh. He would point with a dirty fingernail. This is the foundation footing. If this isn't right, the whole house falls. It doesn't matter how pretty the paint is. If the bones are bad, the house is dead. My parents' house, I murmured one night, tracing a line on the paper. They care about the paint. They don't care about the bones. Then their house will fall, Miller said. And when it does, you be the one standing on solid ground to buy the pieces. That sentence planted a seed in my brain. A dark, ambitious seed. I started working harder. I got a job as a laborer on a framing crew. I was the guy who carried the lumber, who swept the sawdust, who took the abuse from the foreman. But I didn't complain. Every time I lifted a heavy beam, I imagined I was building my own foundation. I saved every penny. I ate ramen. I slept in a beat-up van I bought for $500. I stopped being Josh the victim. I became Josh the builder. Miller died that winter. Pneumonia. I held his hand while we waited for the ambulance that came too late. Before he passed, he grabbed my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Don't stay under the bridge, kid," he wheezed. "Build your own bridge. And don't let anyone take your space again." I paid for his cremation with my savings. It wiped me out, but I didn't care. I put his ashes in a small canister and kept it in my van. That was the day the boy died, and the man was born. I vowed I would never sleep in the dirt again. I vowed I would own the dirt. Back in the present, the door to 1402 Oak Street finally opened. My father stood there. He looked older. His hair was thinning, his belly spilling over the waistband of his sweatpants. He held a half-eaten sandwich in one hand. He blinked, his eyes adjusting to the bright afternoon sun. He looked at the Rolls-Royce in the driveway, then at me. He didn't recognize me at first. I was wearing a $3,000 suit. I was 6 feet tall now, filled out with muscle from years of throwing drywall and concrete. My jawline was sharp, hidden under a groomed beard. "Can I help you?" he asked, wiping crumbs from his mouth. "We're not buying anything. And if you're from the collection agency, I told you guys to stop calling." "Hello, Dad," I said. My voice was deep, steady. He froze. He squinted, leaning forward. "Josh, it's been a long time," I said. "Nice sweatpants." "Josh." He opened the door wider, a fake, wide smile plastering onto his face. Catherine, come here. It's Josh. He's back." He reached out to hug me. I didn't move. I didn't step forward. I just stood there, a statue of ice. He stopped awkwardly, patting my arm instead. "Look at you. You look successful. Is that your car?" He pointed a shaking finger at the Rolls-Royce. "It is." Mom came running to the door. She looked tired. Her face was lined with stress. Her hair dyed a cheap, brassy blonde to hide the gray. She saw me and burst into tears. "Oh, my baby. I knew you'd come back. I knew you wouldn't abandon us." Abandon them? The irony was so thick I could taste it like blood in my mouth. "I'm not here for a reunion, Mom," I said, stepping past them into the foyer. The smell hit me instantly. Stale cigarette smoke, cat litter, and mildew. The house was a wreck. There were piles of unopened mail on the side table, mostly overdue bills. The carpet was stained. "Where is he?" I asked. "Who?" Mom asked, wiping her eyes. "Ethan. Where is the creative genius?" From the back of the house, from my old room, came a voice screaming. "Mom, the internet is lagging again. I'm losing viewers. Fix it." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Ah, hard at work. I see." I walked toward the hallway, my parents trailing behind me like nervous puppies. "He's under a lot of stress," Mom said quickly, wringing her hands. "The streaming market is very competitive. He's this close to a breakthrough." 7 years close? I asked without looking back. I remembered the grind. While Ethan was waiting for a breakthrough, I was breaking my back. After Miller died, I worked like a man possessed. I realized that in construction, knowledge was the only currency that mattered. I didn't just carry wood. I watched the electricians, the plumbers, the HVAC guys. I asked questions. I stayed late. By 20, I was a foreman. I could read a blueprint better than guys with degrees. By 21, I got my general contractor's license. By 22, I made my first kill. It was a fire-damaged duplex in the worst part of town. The bank wanted to offload it for pennies. I used every cent I had saved, plus a hard money loan with an exorbitant interest rate. Everyone told me I was crazy. "It's a teardown, Josh," my boss had said. "The foundation is cracked." "No," I told him, channeling Miller. "The foundation is settled. The cracks are superficial. I can stitch them." I lived in that house while I fixed it. I breathed drywall dust. I slept on a mattress surrounded by exposed wiring. I did 90% of the work myself to save on labor. 6 months later, I sold it for a $120,000 profit. That was the first time I saw a check with 6 figures. I stared at it for an hour, shaking. I bought a steak dinner that night. I ate it alone, sitting in my truck, looking at the stars. Then I did it again, and again. I started a company, Sterling Developments. I stopped swinging the hammer and started swinging deals. I learned about leverage, equity, foreclosure auctions, and tax liens. I learned that debt, when used correctly, is a weapon. And I learned about my family. I never called them, but I kept tabs. I had a spy. Mrs. Reynolds lived 2 doors down from 1402 Oak Street. She was a sweet old lady who used to sneak me cookies when I was a kid because she knew Mom didn't feed me enough. One day, I saw her at the grocery store while I was inspecting a commercial site nearby. We got coffee. She told me everything. "It's a tragedy, Josh," she whispered, stirring her tea. "Ethan, that boy is a black hole. He never got a job. Not one. He convinced your parents that he was building a brand. He spent thousands on computers, cameras, fancy chairs. And Dad, your father retired early to cash out his 401k, to invest in Ethan's company." I choked on my coffee. Company? Ethan doesn't have a company. He calls it Sterling Media. It's just him screaming at video games in his underwear. But he gambles, Josh. Online loot boxes, sports betting, crypto scams. He lost the retirement money in 2 years. So how are they surviving? Mrs. Reynolds lowered her voice. They took out a second mortgage, then a third. I heard your father arguing with the bank on the phone in the backyard. They are drowning, honey. And Ethan, he treats them like servants. That night, I went back to my office. I pulled up the public property records for 1402 Oak Street. It was a mess. Liens everywhere, unpaid property taxes, and a notice of default filed 3 months prior. They were about to lose the house. I sat back in my leather chair, looking at the screen. I could have written a check. I could have driven over there, paid off the arrears, and saved them. It would have been the good son thing to do. But then I remembered the bridge. I remembered the rats. I remembered, you're just taking up space. They didn't just kick me out. They actively chose to destroy my start in life to fuel Ethan's delusion. They enabled a parasite and sacrificed the host. If I saved them now, nothing would change. Ethan would drain them dry again, and I would be the fool. No, they needed to learn about foundations. You can't build on rot. You have to tear it down. I reached the door to my old room, Ethan's studio. I pushed it open. The smell was worse here. Body odor and stale energy drinks. The room was dark, the windows covered with heavy blackout curtains. The only light came from 3 massive monitors. Ethan was slumped in a gaming chair that looked like a race car seat. He was wearing a headset, shouting into a microphone. "He's hacking. No way. Mods, ban him. Ban him." He spun around when he saw me. He looked pale, puffy, and soft. His eyes were sunken, dark circles bruising the skin beneath them. He looked like a cave creature. "Who the hell are?" He trailed off, squinting. "Josh." He pulled his headset off, his greasy hair sticking up. "What are you doing here? You can't just barge in while I'm live. I have 300 viewers. 300, I repeated. "Wow, that must pay the bills." "It's growing," he snapped defensively. "What do you want? Come to beg for money?" I heard construction work dries up in the winter. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh of disbelief. He still thought I was the loser. He still thought he was the king of the castle. "I'm not here for money, Ethan. I'm here to see the space. Dad said you needed this room for your career. I just wanted to see the return on investment." I looked around. Pizza boxes stacked in the corner. Empty cans. Holes punched in the drywall. Rage quits, probably. The carpet was burned in spots. "Get out," Ethan sneered. "This is private property." "Is it?" I asked softly. Dad and Mom squeezed into the doorway behind me. "Boys, please," Dad said. "Josh, come to the kitchen. We have some things to discuss." I turned away from Ethan, disgusted. Yeah, we do. We went to the kitchen. I sat at the table, the same table where they had evicted me. Mom poured me a glass of water. Her hands were shaking so bad she spilled some on the table. So, Dad started, trying to sound authoritative but failing. We're in a bit of a tight spot, Josh. Temporary cash flow issues. The economy, you know. I know the economy is great, I said. Real estate is booming. Right. Dad dabbed sweat from his forehead. Look, we heard you're doing. Okay. Handyman work. Developer, I corrected. I own a construction firm and a holding company. They blinked. The information didn't compute. That's wonderful, Mom said, her eyes lighting up with desperation. Josh, honey, we need a loan. Just a bridge loan. $50,000. The bank is being unreasonable about the mortgage. They don't understand that Ethan's payout is coming next month. Ethan's payout has been coming next month for 7 years, I said coldly. He's our son. Dad slammed his hand on the table. We support family. You didn't support me, I said. The room went silent. That was different, Mom whispered. You were strong. We knew you could handle it. And look, we were right. You're successful. If we had let you stay, you might have ended up lazy. I felt the blood boil in my veins. They were taking credit for my survival. They were twisting their cruelty into a parenting strategy. You think sleeping under a bridge made me successful? I leaned forward. You think eating out of dumpsters was a lesson plan? You slept under a bridge? Mom covered her mouth. For 6 months. While you bought Ethan a new graphics card. We didn't know, Dad mumbled, looking down. You didn't ask. You didn't care. As long as you had your space. I stood up. I'm not giving you a loan. Panic flashed in their eyes. Josh, please. They're going to take the house. The auction is next week. No, I said, checking my watch. The auction was canceled. It was. Dad looked up, hope flooding his face. Oh, thank God. Did you talk to them? I did better than that, I said. I bought the note. You bought the note? Dad repeated, the words tasting foreign in his mouth. What does that mean? It means, I said, pacing slowly around the kitchen, that the bank sold your debt to a private investor. They didn't want the hassle of foreclosing on you anymore. You were a bad asset. Toxic. I had set this up 2 months ago. My company, Sterling Developments, often bought distressed assets. But for this one, I created a special LLC. I called it Bridgeview Holdings. A little inside joke that only I understood. I instructed Sarah, my lawyer, to approach the bank. They were happy to unload the non-performing loan for 80 cents on the dollar. For the last month, my parents thought they were negotiating with a faceless corporation. They had ignored the letters. They had hung up on Sarah. They thought if they ignored the problem, it would go away. Or that a miracle would happen. So, you know the investor? Mom asked, clutching Dad's arm. Can you talk to them? Ask for an extension? Just 6 months. Ethan is going to release a merchandise line. I stopped pacing. I looked at the peeling wallpaper. I looked at the height chart marked on the doorframe. My marks stopped at age 18. Ethan's marks went all the way up, even though he hadn't grown an inch since high school. I don't need to talk to the investor, Mom. I am the investor. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. The refrigerator hummed in the background. You? Dad laughed nervously. Stop joking, Josh. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars. $240,000, remaining principal, I recited. Plus $40,000 in arrears, penalties, and interest. Plus $12,000 in unpaid property taxes, which I paid last week to prevent the county from seizing the deed. I pulled a folder from my jacket pocket. I tossed it onto the table. It slid across the sticky surface and stopped in front of my father. He opened it. His hands shook so hard the papers rattled. He saw the transfer of lien. He saw the signature, Joshua Sterling, CEO, Bridgeview Holdings, LLC. Oh my God! Mom whispered. She looked at me with a mixture of awe and terror. You own the mortgage? You own our house. Technically, until you pay it off, I hold the security interest. But since you are in default and the grace period expired yesterday, I let the sentence hang. Ethan walked into the kitchen then, hunting for a soda. He sensed the tension. What's going on? Why is everyone so quiet? Your brother bought the house, Dad said, his voice hollow. Ethan laughed. Him? Yeah, right. He's probably renting that suit. He grabbed a Mountain Dew from the fridge. Look, Josh, if you have money, I need $5,000 for a new server. It's an investment. I'll give you 5% equity in my channel. Ethan, shut up, Dad roared. It was the first time I had ever heard him yell at the golden child. Ethan dropped the soda. It exploded on the linoleum, fizzing green foam everywhere. Dad! Ethan looked shocked. Why are you yelling at me? Because we are homeless, you idiot. Dad screamed, standing up. His face was purple. We lost the house. Josh owns it. He can't kick us out, Ethan stammered, looking at me. We're family. Family doesn't evict family. Family doesn't kick an 18-year-old out into the rain to build a gaming room, I countered calmly. I looked at my mother. She was crying silently now. Josh, please. We're sorry. We made a mistake. We know that now. But you can't do this. Where will we go? Your father has a bad back. I have high blood pressure. I had pneumonia, I said. Under a bridge. We'll pay you rent. Dad offered desperately. We'll get jobs. I'll go back to work at the warehouse. Ethan will get a job. I can't get a job, Ethan whined. I have anxiety. I can't deal with people. You'll get a job or you'll starve. Dad yelled at him. Then he turned back to me, pleading. Josh, please. Just let us stay. We'll pay you. We'll sign a contract. This was the moment. The power shift. For 7 years, they held all the cards. They held the keys, the warmth, the food, the love. I had nothing. Now I held the roof over their heads. I felt a surge of adrenaline, but it wasn't joy. It was a cold, hard resolution. I thought about that, I said. I really did. I thought about letting you stay, charging you fair market rent. Letting you work it off. Yes, we'll do that. Mom nodded frantically. But then I looked at the inspection report. I lied. There was no report, but I knew this house. The foundation is rotting. The toxicity in this house. It's too high. It needs to be gutted. What are you saying? Dad asked. I'm saying you have failed as stewards of this property. And you failed as parents. You invested everything in a lie. I pointed at Ethan and threw away the truth. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the second document. The eviction notice. You have 24 hours, I said. 24 hours? Mom screamed. That's illegal. You have to give us 30 days. I gave you 30 days, I said, tapping the file on the table. My lawyer sent the notice to quit a month ago. You threw it in the trash. I sent the notice of default 3 months ago. You ignored it. The legal time is up. The sheriff is scheduled to arrive tomorrow at noon to remove any trespassers. Trespassers, Dad whispered. We built this house. You bought it, I corrected. And then you let it die. Just like you let our relationship die. Ethan stepped forward, his face red. He tried to puff out his chest, trying to be intimidating. You think you're tough because you have money now? I'll beat your ass, Josh. I'll take that fancy suit and... He swung at me, a clumsy, slow, over-telegraphed punch from a guy whose only combat experience was in a video game. I caught his fist. I didn't even flinch. My hand, hardened by years of carrying steel and concrete, clamped around his soft, doughy knuckles. I squeezed. Ethan yelped, dropping to his knees. Ow! Ow! Let go. You're breaking it. My hands built buildings, I whispered, leaning down into his face. Your hands hold a mouse. Don't ever touch me again. I shoved him back. He sprawled into the puddle of Mountain Dew, gasping. Josh, stop, Mom wailed. He's your brother. He's a tenant who hasn't paid rent in 7 years, I said. And his lease is up. I turned to leave. Start packing. Take what you can carry. Anything left tomorrow at noon goes into a dumpster. You can't do this, Dad shouted after me. It's cruel. It's heartless. I stopped at the door. I looked back at the three of them, a broken tableau of dysfunction. Cruel? I asked. Cruel is telling your son he doesn't deserve a roof because his brother needs a playroom. Cruel is letting your kid sleep in the dirt while you sleep on a Serta mattress. This isn't cruel, Dad. This is business. This is resource allocation. I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently. Control. I had total control. I sat in my Rolls-Royce, staring at the house. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the release of 7 years of poison. I drove to a hotel, the nicest one in the city. I ordered room service. I slept for 10 hours, dreamless and deep. The next day, I returned at 11:55 a.m. I brought backup. Not just the sheriff, but a moving crew I had hired. And a locksmith. The driveway was chaotic. Dad was trying to shove a sofa into the back of a rented U-Haul. Mom was carrying boxes of clothes, sobbing. Ethan was sitting on the curb, holding his computer tower like it was a baby, refusing to help. When I pulled up, the sheriff was already there, leaning against his cruiser, checking his watch. Mr. Sterling? The sheriff asked. That's me. They're moving slow, the sheriff noted. You want me to speed them up? Give them a minute, I said. I got out. Dad saw me. He dropped the end of the sofa. He looked defeated, aged 10 years overnight. Josh, he croaked. We have nowhere to go. The motels are full. Our credit is shot. No one will rent to us. We have the van, Mom said, wiping her nose. We can sleep in the van for a few nights. The van, I repeated. Like the one I slept in? She flinched. We're sorry. How many times do we have to say it? We're sorry. Sorry doesn't pay the mortgage, I said. And sorry doesn't give me back the years I lost. But why? Mom asked, gesturing to the house. Why do you need it so bad? You have money. You have a mansion somewhere, I'm sure. Why do you need this rundown old house? Just to punish us? I don't need the house, I said. I have a penthouse downtown. Then why? Ethan yelled from the curb. Why kick us out if you don't even need the space? Because, I smiled. My new tenants need it. Tenants? Dad frowned. You already rented it out? Who would want to live here? It's a dump. I'm not renting it for money, I said. I pulled out my phone and sent a text. Bring them in. At the end of the street, a white 15-passenger van turned the corner. On the side, painted in blue letters, was a logo. The Bridge Foundation. It pulled into the driveway behind the U-Haul. What is this? Dad asked. The doors of the van opened. 6 teenagers stepped out. They looked rough. Hoodies, backpacks, worn-out shoes. Some had the hollow look of hunger. Some had the defiant look of fear. They looked exactly like I did 7 years ago. A woman stepped out from the driver's seat. It was Mrs. Reynolds, my neighbor. She was smiling. I had hired her as the house manager. Hello, Josh, she said. Is the house ready? It will be in about 5 minutes, I said. I turned to my parents. The realization was dawning on them, slow and painful. This is the Bridge Foundation, I announced. It's a non-profit I started last year. We provide transitional housing for young men and women who have been kicked out of their homes. Kids who were told they weren't wanted. Kids who need space. My mother put her hand over her mouth. She looked at the teenagers, then at the house, then at me. You're turning our home into a shelter? Dad whispered. I'm turning my house into a home, I corrected. Something it hasn't been for a long time. I pointed to the teenagers. See that kid there? The one with the blue beanie? His parents kicked him out yesterday because he came out as gay. He slept in a park last night. I pointed to another. That girl? Her stepdad beat her. She ran away. And they need this room, I said, pointing to Ethan's window. More than you do. Ethan stood up. You're giving my studio to a bunch of homeless kids? It's going to be a computer lab, I said, for them to do homework, to apply for jobs, to build futures, real futures, not fantasy ones. This was the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for being patient with me this far. You are amazing. Please like the video and comment 1 below so I know you've stuck with me. This helps more people find this story and lets me know my experience means something to you. Your support is my biggest motivation to share the rest of this journey. The silence in the driveway was absolute, broken only by the chirping of a bird and the distant hum of traffic. My parents stood frozen, caught between shame and shock. They looked at the ragtag group of teenagers, the ghosts of the son they had discarded, and then back at the house they had prioritized over him. This isn't fair, Ethan muttered, but there was no heat in it anymore. He looked small, without his chair, his monitors, his audience. He was just a 27-year-old man in sweatpants with nowhere to go. Fairness is a luxury, I said to him. You had 27 years of unfair advantage. Now the scales are balancing. Mrs. Reynolds walked up the driveway, her keys jingling. She stopped in front of my mother. They had been neighbors for 30 years. They used to swap cookie recipes. Now, Mrs. Reynolds looked at Catherine Sterling with a pity that cut deeper than hate. Catherine, Mrs. Reynolds said softly, you should go. These kids need to get settled before dark. Mary, my mom pleaded, grabbing Mrs. Reynolds' hand. You can't let him do this. You know us. We're good people. Mrs. Reynolds gently pulled her hand away. Good people don't throw their children away, Catherine. I watched Josh sleep in his car in my driveway some nights when you thought he was gone. I fed him when you were buying Ethan new computers. Go. Just go. That was the final blow. My mother crumbled. She sobbed, leaning against the dirty U-Haul. Dad put his arm around her, staring at me with eyes that were no longer angry, just hollow. Josh, Dad said quietly, if we get back on our feet, can we visit? I looked at the kids. The boy in the blue beanie was looking at the house with wide eyes, like he couldn't believe he was allowed to go inside. I don't think that's a good idea, I said. This is a safe space. These kids need to heal from trauma caused by people like you. Seeing you, it wouldn't help. So that's it, Dad asked. We're dead to you? You're not dead, I said. You're just strangers. Strangers who used to know me. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a white envelope. I'm not a monster, I said. I'm not you. I handed the envelope to Dad. He opened it. Inside wasn't a check. It was a pamphlet and a reservation confirmation. What is this? He asked. It's a reservation for a prepaid efficiency apartment. 1 month. Paid in full, I said. It's clean. It has a kitchenette. It's not a bridge. Dad looked at me, his lip quivering. And the pamphlet, I continued, pointing to the colorful brochure for New Horizons Rehab and Career Center. That's for Ethan. They treat gambling addiction and help with job placement. If he checks in, I'll pay for the treatment. If he doesn't, well, the apartment only allows 2 occupants. Ethan looked at the pamphlet. Rehab? I'm not a junkie. You're addicted to a fantasy, Ethan, I said. And it cost your parents their home. Check in or sleep on the street. Your choice. Be a man for the first time in your life. I turned my back on them. I walked over to the kids. Hey everyone, I said, raising my voice to be heard over the wind. I'm Josh. Welcome to the Bridge House. The kids murmured hellos. They looked wary. They had been promised things before. I know you're scared, I said. I know you think this is a trick. I know you're waiting for the catch. But there isn't one. 7 years ago, I stood exactly where you are standing. I was kicked out of this house. The boy in the beanie spoke up. This house? You lived here. I did. And my parents chose a room over me. But I promised myself that if I ever got it back, I wouldn't keep it for myself. I'd give it to people who actually needed the space. I looked back at the driveway. The U-Haul engine roared to life. My father was driving. My mother was staring straight ahead, weeping. Ethan was in the back seat, looking at the rehab pamphlet. They pulled away. I watched them go until the truck turned the corner and disappeared. I didn't feel the triumph I thought I would. I didn't feel like dancing on their grave. I just felt light. The weight of the anger, the resentment, the need for their approval, it was gone. It left with that truck. Mr. Josh. I looked down. A young girl, maybe 16, was holding a small trash bag of clothes. Is it true we get our own keys? I smiled. A real smile this time. Yeah, you get a key. And a lock. And no one enters your room without knocking. I walked them to the door. I put the key in the lock, the same lock my father had turned against me. I twisted it. The door swung open. Come on in, I said. Welcome home. We spent the rest of the afternoon moving them in. I took off my suit jacket, rolled up my sleeves, and hauled boxes. We cleared out the last of Ethan's junk. A broken gaming chair, a box of cables, and threw it in the trash. In Ethan's old room, I stood with the boy in the beanie. His name was Leo. This is a huge room, Leo said, spinning around. The light is amazing. Yeah, I said, remembering Dad's words. Best natural light. It's going to be the library. We're putting desks here, computers there, bookshelves along that wall. I like to draw, Leo said shyly. Is that okay? Leo, I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. You can draw, you can read, you can stare at the wall. This is your space. You don't have to earn it. You just have to be here. As the sun began to set, casting long orange shadows across the floor, I walked out to the porch. Mrs. Reynolds came out with 2 mugs of tea. You did good, Josh, she said. I feel bad for them, Mrs. Reynolds, I admitted. Is that weird? I just evicted them. It's not weird. It means you have a heart, she said. But remember, you didn't break them. They were broken a long time ago. You just stopped letting their broken pieces cut you. I nodded, sipping the tea. Tasted like closure. So, she asked, what now? You going back to your penthouse? I looked at my Rolls-Royce parked at the curb. It looked out of place here. Yeah, I said. I have a business to run. I have other houses to build. But I'll be back. I have to check on the tenants. I walked down the steps. I got into my car. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The lights in the house were coming on, one by one. Warm yellow light. The house didn't look scary anymore. It looked alive. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah, my lawyer. Update on the parents. Ethan just checked into the clinic. Your dad called to thank you for the apartment. He sounded relieved. I put the phone down. Relieved. Maybe they needed the eviction too. Maybe they needed to be forced to stop drowning. I turned onto the highway, the city skyline rising ahead of me. I was Joshua Sterling. I was the boy under the bridge. I was the man who bought the house. And finally, for the first time in 7 years, I was free. Part 7. The Aftermath and the Echoes of Silence. Word count. Approximate 2,600 words. The adrenaline crash hit me about 3 hours after I drove away from Oak Street. I was sitting in my penthouse, looking out at the Seattle skyline. From up here, the city looked like a circuit board, gold and silver lines of light pulsing with energy. It was quiet. My air conditioning hummed with a soft, expensive efficiency. My refrigerator was stocked with sparkling water and organic produce. My bed had Egyptian cotton sheets with a thread count higher than my parents' credit score. I had everything: space, comfort, silence. But for the first time in years, the silence felt heavy. My phone sat on the marble countertop, dark and still. I kept waiting for it to ring. I kept waiting for the angry voicemail from my dad, or the guilt-tripping text from my mom, or a threat from Ethan. But there was nothing. I had severed the limb, and now I was just feeling the phantom pain. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, but I didn't drink it. I just held the cold glass against my forehead. The next morning, I didn't go to my office at Sterling Developments. I drove back to the house. I told myself I was going to check on the property, inspect the HVAC, maybe look at the roof. But that was a lie. I wanted to see if it was real. I wanted to make sure I hadn't dreamed the eviction. When I pulled up, the U-Haul was gone. The trash pile was gone. Mrs. Reynolds was on the porch, sweeping. She saw my car and waved. She didn't look like a property manager. She looked like a grandmother guarding her nest. "You're early," she called out as I walked up the driveway. "Breakfast isn't until 8. "I'm not hungry," I said. "How was the first night?" "Noisy," she laughed. Pipes rattled. Floorboards creaked. And Leo, the boy in the beanie, he screamed in his sleep around 3 a.m. My chest tightened. "Nightmares? Trauma," she corrected. He thought his stepdad was breaking in. I sat with him for an hour. Made him hot cocoa. I nodded, looking at the upstairs window. My old room, Ethan's old studio, now Leo's library. He'll settle in. It takes time to trust the locks. "He asked about you," Mrs. Reynolds said. "He wanted to know if you were coming back to kick them out, too." "I need to talk to him," I said. I found Leo in the backyard. He was sitting on the old swing set my dad had built 20 years ago. The chains were rusty, squeaking with a rhythmic, mournful sound. Leo was sketching in a notebook, his knees pulled up to his chest. "Hey," I said, keeping my distance. I didn't want to startle him. Leo jumped anyway, snapping the notebook shut. "Mr. Josh, I wasn't doing anything. Just sitting." "It's your yard, Leo. You can sit wherever you want." I walked over and leaned against the oak tree. "Mrs. Reynolds told me you had a rough night." Leo looked down at his sneakers. They were held together with duct tape. "I'm sorry. I won't wake everyone up again. I can sleep with a pillow over my face." "Don't do that," I said sharply. Then I softened my tone. "I used to have nightmares too. When I slept under the bridge, I used to dream that the concrete was cracking, that the whole highway was falling on me. I'd wake up gasping for air, choking on dust that wasn't there." Leo looked up, his eyes wide. "The bridge? You really lived there?" "For 6 months," I said. "And you know what I learned? The bridge doesn't fall. The concrete holds. This house, it has good bones now. The bad energy is gone. You're safe here." "My stepdad," Leo hesitated, his voice trembling. "He said I was worthless. Said I was taking up space he could use for his gym equipment." I laughed. A short, bitter sound. Gym equipment. For me, it was a streaming studio. People rationalize their cruelty, Leo. They value things over people because things are easy. Things don't talk back. Things don't have needs. But you are not a thing. You are a tenant. And in this house, tenants have rights. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a business card. It wasn't my CO card. It was a personal one. "If anyone comes here bothering you, if your stepdad shows up, if you feel unsafe, you call this number. I have a lawyer named Sarah who eats bullies for breakfast. And I have a security team that enjoys their job very much." Leo took the card like it was gold. "Thanks, Josh. Call me landlord," I joked. "And keep the noise down after 10. Mrs. Reynolds needs her beauty sleep." I drove away feeling lighter. I realized then that my revenge wasn't the eviction. The eviction was just the demolition. The revenge was the reconstruction. Every night those kids slept safely was a victory against my parents' philosophy. 2 weeks later, the bill for the rehab center hit my desk. New Horizons Rehab and Career Center. Patient, Ethan Sterling. Charges, $12,500. Month 1. My accountant had flagged it, asking if it was a mistake. I stared at the invoice. $12,000. That was more than my parents had spent on me in my entire life. I signed the check, but I decided to deliver it personally. New Horizons was a sprawling facility about an hour outside the city. It looked like a resort, but with higher fences and fewer smiles. I walked into the visitors' lounge. It smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. Ethan was sitting at a round table, staring at a puzzle. 1,000 pieces. Picture of a lighthouse. He looked different. He had lost weight. The puffiness in his face had receded, revealing the sharp jawline he shared with our father. He wasn't wearing his headset. He was wearing a plain gray t-shirt and sweatpants. His hands, usually busy with a mouse and keyboard, were trembling slightly as he tried to fit a blue piece into the sky. "That's a cloud piece," I said, walking up behind him. "It goes in the upper left." Ethan froze. He didn't turn around immediately. He took a deep breath, his shoulders rising and falling. "What do you want, Josh?" His voice was raspy. "Just bringing the check," I said, sitting opposite him. "They said you're doing well. You haven't tried to smuggle in a smartphone." Ethan finally looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. "I tried the first day. I bribed a janitor. He took my money and reported me. I lost my commissary privileges for a week." "Good janitor," I said. "I should hire him." Ethan pushed the puzzle away, destroying the progress he had made on the border. "Why are you doing this? You kick us out, humiliate Dad, make Mom cry, and then you pay for this fancy prison? Is it a power trip? You want to own me too?" "I don't want to own you, Ethan. I want you to be useful." "Useful?" He spat the word out. "Like you? The great builder? Not everyone wants to sweat for a living, Josh. You don't have to sweat. You just have to exist in reality. Tell me, Ethan, in the 7 years you spent in that room, what did you build? What did you create?" "I built a community," he argued, but his voice lacked conviction. "I had followers. You had usernames in a chat box. You had bots. You had no income, no retirement fund, no assets, no skills. You were 27 years old and you couldn't do your own laundry. That's not a community. That's a nursery." Ethan looked down at his hands. "It was all I had. Mom and Dad. They told me I was special. They said I was going to be big. They invested everything. Couldn't let them down. So I kept playing. I kept betting. I thought one big win, just one big win, and I could pay off the mortgage. I could buy you a car. I could fix it." I paused. This was the first time I had heard this. "You wanted to fix it?" "I knew I was drowning them," Ethan whispered. A tear leaked out and rolled down his cheek. "Every time I asked for money, I saw Dad's face get grayer. I saw Mom cutting coupons. But I didn't know how to stop. I was in too deep. The room, that space you hated so much, it wasn't a studio. It was a bunker. I was hiding from the world because I was terrified I couldn't survive in it." He looked at me, and for the first time in my life I didn't see the golden child. I saw a terrified boy trapped in a man's body. "You were right," Ethan said, "about the eviction. If you hadn't done it, I think I would have died in that chair. Heart attack or stroke. I was eating garbage and sleeping 4 hours a day." "You might have," I agreed. "So, thanks," he grunted, looking away. "But don't expect a hug." "I don't want a hug. I want a return on my investment." I tapped the invoice. "This costs 12 grand a month. When you get out, you owe me." "I can't pay that." "Not money. Labor. My company needs IT support. Real support. Networking, inventory systems, server maintenance. You know computers. You just used them for the wrong things. You work for me for 2 years at entry-level salary. We deduct the rehab cost from your paycheck. Deal?" Ethan stared at me. "You'd hire me? After I tried to punch you?" "I hired a guy who used to steal copper wire from my sites. He's my best electrician now. Everyone deserves a chance to rebuild the foundation. Even you." I stood up. "Think about it. You have 29 days left in here." I walked out of the rehab center into the bright sunlight. I felt a knot loosen in my stomach. I hadn't forgiven him, not fully, but I understood him. He was a victim of my parents too. They starved me of love, but they choked him with it. Both were forms of abuse. Speaking of parents, I had one more stop. The Efficiency apartment. It was located in a complex called the Pines, which was ironic because there wasn't a pine tree within 5 miles. It was a concrete block building near the industrial district. I parked my Rolls-Royce between a rusted pickup truck and a sedan with a taped-up window. I got looks. I ignored them. Apartment 2B. I knocked. Mom opened the door. She was wearing an apron. The smell of boiled cabbage wafted out. It was a smell I remembered from my childhood, from the lean years before Dad got his promotion, before Ethan needed equipment. Josh! She wiped her hands on her apron, her eyes darting to the hallway to see if neighbors were watching. Come in. Quickly. The apartment was tiny. 1 room, basically. A kitchenette in the corner, a small sofa, a TV on a milk crate, and a bed separated by a hanging sheet. It was clean, though. Painfully clean. Dad was sitting at the small round table, circling ads in a newspaper with a red pen. He looked up, taking off his reading glasses. "Son," he said. His voice was subdued. We didn't expect you." "I was visiting Ethan," I said, remaining standing. There wasn't really anywhere to sit. "How is he?" Mom asked anxiously. "Is he eating? Is he crying? Does he hate us?" "He's detoxing," I said. "He's realizing that the world is bigger than a 24-inch monitor. And no, he doesn't hate you. He pities you. And he blames himself." Dad put the pen down. "He shouldn't. It was our fault. We bet on the wrong horse." "It's not about horses, Dad. It's not a race. You treated your children like investments. You diversified your portfolio by liquidating one asset to pump up the other. That's bad business. And it's terrible parenting." Dad flinched. "I know. We've had a lot of time to think in here. It's intimate." He gestured to the small room. "We can't hide from each other here. No gaming room. No garage. Just us. And we realized we don't really know each other anymore," Mom said softly. "We spent 20 years focusing on Ethan's future. We forgot to live our present." She walked over to the stove and stirred the pot. "We're looking for work. Your father has an interview at the hardware store tomorrow. Stocking shelves. It's minimum wage," Dad said, a ghost of a smile on his face. "Funny. I told you to work for minimum wage when you were 18. Said it builds character. I guess it's my turn to build some." "I guess so," I said. I looked around the sad little apartment. I could have moved them somewhere better. I could have bought them a condo. I had the money, but I remembered the bridge. I remembered Miller telling me that the foundation has to settle before you can build. "I'm glad you're trying," I said. "Keep looking. If you get the job, Dad, let me know. Maybe in a few months, if you're stable, we can get coffee." Dad's eyes welled up. "Coffee. I'd like that." "But not yet," I said firmly. "You have to earn the space in my life, just like I had to earn mine." I turned to leave. Mom stopped me. "Josh." "Yeah." "The house?" she asked. "The kids? Are they taking care of it?" "They love it," I said. "They're painting the fence this weekend. Leo is planting a garden in the back. It's finally a home, Mom." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Good. That's good." I walked out of the Pines. I got back into my car. I drove home, not to the penthouse, but to the river. I parked near the old bridge, the one where I had slept. I walked down the embankment. The smell was the same, wet earth and exhaust. The graffiti was new, but the darkness was familiar. I stood in the spot where Miller and I used to build fires in an oil drum. I looked up at the massive concrete arch. "I did it, Miller," I whispered. "I bought the pieces. I built the bridge." A rat scurried past my shoe. I didn't flinch. I wasn't one of them anymore. But I would never forget that I used to be. The war was over. The eviction was done. The family was broken, scattered, and slowly, painfully trying to reset their bones. And me? I was the architect of it all. For the first time in 7 years, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't ambition. It was peace. Seasons change fast in the Midwest. One day it's freezing rain. The next the humidity hits you like a wet towel. It had been exactly 12 months since the eviction. 12 months since I walked onto that porch with a vengeance in my heart and a deed in my hand. Today, the air at 1402 Oak Street smelled like charcoal and barbecue sauce. I parked my Rolls-Royce down the street, not out of shame, but because the driveway was full. There was a beat-up Honda Civic, Mrs. Reynolds' station wagon, and a dozen bicycles leaning against the newly painted white fence. The peeling gray siding was gone. The house was now a cheerful, bright yellow with white trim. The gutters were fixed. The lawn wasn't just mowed. It was manicured, with flower beds bursting with marigolds and petunias. It was the first annual Bridge House block party. I adjusted my tie. I wasn't wearing a suit today, just slacks and a polo, and walked up the sidewalk. Music was playing from a Bluetooth speaker on the porch. Not classical, not the silence of my penthouse, but something upbeat and modern. Laughter drifted from the backyard. Leo was the first to see me. He ran around the corner of the house holding a spatula. He had grown 3 inches in a year. The beanie was gone. His hair was cut short, styled. He looked healthy. He looked like a kid, not a survivalist. "Mr. Josh," he yelled. "You made it. We were worried you were closing a deal or something." "I closed the office early," I said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm. "I wouldn't miss this. I heard you're manning the grill." "Burgers and dogs," Leo grinned. "And veggie skewers for Maya. She's going through a phase." "Good man." I walked into the backyard. It was transformed. The old, dead grass was replaced by lush turf. There was a vegetable garden in the corner where my dad used to pile his junk. A long picnic table was set up under the oak tree. Mrs. Reynolds was holding court at the table, pouring lemonade. She looked 5 years younger. Having purpose does that to people. "Josh!" She waved me over. "Come sit. Try the potato salad. It's your mother's recipe. Well, my version of it. Hers always lacked paprika." I sat down, taking a paper plate. "How is everyone?" "Thriving," she said, lowering her voice. "Maya got her GED last week. Leo has an interview for an apprenticeship at a graphic design firm. And we have 2 new arrivals coming on Monday. Twins. Ran away from a foster home that locked the fridge at night. We'll fill the fridge," I said. "Whatever they need." "You always do," she smiled, patting my hand. Then the gate latch clicked. The chatter in the yard died down slightly. I turned around. Ethan walked in. He looked normal. That was the only word for it. He was wearing jeans and a polo shirt with the logo of my company, Sterling Developments, embroidered on the chest. He was carrying a bag of ice and a 6-pack of soda. He spotted me and hesitated, then walked over. "Hey, boss," he said. "Hey, technician," I replied. Ethan set the ice down in the cooler. He had been working for me for 8 months now. He started in the server room organizing cables. He complained for the first 3 weeks. He threatened to quit twice. But Sarah, my lawyer and now unofficial HR enforcer, reminded him of the contract. Slowly, the work changed him. He found out he was actually good at troubleshooting. He liked fixing things. He liked the logic of code, which was different from the chaos of gaming. He liked getting a paycheck that was real. "Mom and Dad coming?" he asked, popping a soda. "They said they might stop by," I said. "Dad got promoted to shift supervisor at the hardware store. He's working Saturdays." "Yeah, I know," Ethan said. "I had dinner with them last Tuesday, at the apartment." "How was it?" "Small," Ethan laughed. "Crowded. Mom made meatloaf. It was dry, but we talked. Actually talked. Dad asked me about my job. He didn't ask about my follower count. It was nice." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. He slid it across the picnic table to me. "What's this?" I asked. "My installment," he said. $500. Toward the rehab debt. "We deduct it from your paycheck, Ethan. You don't have to pay cash." "I know. This is extra." I sold my old gaming rig. The chair, the monitors, the mic. Everything. I looked at him, surprised. You sold the rig? I thought that was your soul. My soul is worth more than a used graphics card. He shrugged. Besides, I don't have time for games. I'm taking night classes. Cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, I nodded. Smart field. High demand. Yeah, figure. I want to protect things, not hide from them. He looked at the house. You know, I hated you when you kicked us out. I wanted you to die. But walking in here today, seeing Leo, seeing the garden, I get it. We were poisoning this place. You were the antidote. Chemotherapy makes you sick before it makes you better, I said. Well, I'm in remission, Ethan smiled. It was a real smile, reaching his eyes. Thanks, Josh, for the eviction. Don't mention it. Just then, a familiar sedan pulled up to the curb. My parents. They walked slowly up the driveway. Dad was wearing his hardware store vest, orange and proud. Mom had a Tupperware container. They looked humble. They looked hesitant. I stood up. Leo froze at the grill, watching. The whole yard seemed to hold its breath. Dad saw me and stopped. He looked at the house, then at me. Josh, he said. We brought brownies. For the kids. Come on in, I said, gesturing to the gate. Open house. They walked in. Mom went straight to Mrs. Reynolds and they hugged. It wasn't awkward. It was the hug of two women who had seen the bottom and climbed back up. Dad walked over to me and Ethan. He looked at Ethan's shirt with my company logo. He looked at my calm demeanor. You boys look good, Dad said. His voice cracked. You look like men. We are men, Dad, I said. I know. I'm sorry it took me losing everything to see it. He looked at the house. It looks beautiful, Josh. Better than I ever kept it. It just needed a new foundation, I said. And some space. We stood there for a moment, the three sterling men. We weren't fixed. We weren't a Hallmark card. There were scars that would never fade. I would never fully forget the rainy night. Ethan would never fully forget the shame of the eviction. Dad would never forget the failure of losing his home. But we were standing on the same grass. And the ground wasn't shaking. As the sun went down, Leo lit a bonfire in the pit. The kids gathered around, roasting marshmallows. I stepped away from the group, walking to the side of the house, near the chimney. I touched the bricks. They were warm from the sun. I reached into my wallet. I pulled out a $20 bill. It wasn't the original one, that one I had spent on food years ago. But it was a symbol. I knelt down near the crawlspace vent, the lowest point of the house. I tucked the $20 bill into a crack in the mortar, deep inside where no one would find it. Paid in full, I whispered. I wasn't paying for the house. I wasn't paying for the rehab. I was paying the final toll on the bridge from my past to my future. I walked back to the party. Leo was laughing at something Ethan said. Mom was serving brownies to a girl with pink hair. Dad was showing Mrs. Reynolds pictures of his hardware store team on his phone. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my lawyer, Sarah. The title transfer is complete. The Bridge Foundation officially owns 1402 Oak Street free and clear. You have no more personal liability. I typed back, I never did. It was never my burden. I put the phone away. I looked at the stars. They looked the same as they did from under the bridge, but tonight nothing was blocking my view. Mr. Josh, Leo called out. S'mores time. You want one? I smiled. Yeah, make it a double. I walked toward the fire, toward the warmth, toward the family I had built from the ashes of the one I was born into. The eviction notice was history. The deed was done. And finally, I had enough space. This story wasn't just about a house or money or revenge. It was about boundaries and enabling. My parents thought they were loving Ethan by giving him everything, but they were actually crippling him. They shielded him from the consequences of reality until reality came crashing down with a sheriff and a locksmith. True love isn't about giving someone space to hide. It's about giving them the tools to stand. And for me, the lesson was about self-definition. I spent years letting their rejection define me. I was the unwanted one. But the moment I stopped looking for their approval and started building my own value, the dynamic flipped. You cannot control how people treat you, but you can control what you accept. The eviction wasn't an act of hate. It was an act of necessary destruction so that something healthy could grow. Sometimes you have to tear the house down to fix the foundation. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set a hard boundary with a family member to save yourself? Or have you been the one who was enabled and had to learn the hard way? Share your story in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, if you believe in the power of rebuilding, just comment good below. It tells me that we are on the same wavelength. Thank you for listening. Keep building your bridge.